The question is about in a film with all these different stories, did I mix up the stories when I was editing and blend them together, or was it that way in the script? And it's in the outline, I did each story A, B, and C. So I had an A story, which was the Maggie story, and a B story, which was the Charlie and the Nikki, the Steve Coogan and the Lisa Kudrow and the Jesse Bradford story, and then the other story. But then, before I wrote the script, I blended because you couldn't have one story starting and then the second story reaching a climax. You had to kind of have everyone jog along in the beginning together. So it was all blended in the outline, and so it was written as you see it. In editing, we switched one or two things around, but just flip-flopping in a very close manner. We usually would go here to this story, but let's go to that story instead, and then we'll catch up to that story. But it all had to work because the film is hitting you as the audience as a single thing, not a bunch of stories. So at a certain point in the film, I want you to feel one way, and gradually, as the movie goes on, it's supposed to be a deepening feeling and a feeling of more consequence. Whereas in the beginning, it's a little jauntier tone, and then it gets deeper or maudlin, as some viewers have been kind enough to point out.
So you do read reviews, because I've recently adopted. To me, I consider that like the trades.
Oh, I never read reviews. But people tell you.
People told you. Oh yeah.
I remember when I wrote Diabolique, I rewrote that, and I knew I should not read reviews for that because I did not love the film. And so everything is banned, and either my sister who works for me or my boyfriend does a sort of a periodical watch, and they know what the bad reviews are. So like for months at a time, there's no New Yorker, and I just try not to, because the New Yorker will give you a bad review, and then in the now playing, they'll give you the capsule bad with all the pain compressed. So like I've had the New Yorker for 6 months. I wonder what that's about, trying to play the game. But after Diabolique, I was walking down the street, and someone came up to me and said, "Oh my God, listen, I hate the LA Times. I for one do not think you're a hack."
Oh my God.
Have a good day.
Oh my
Literally.
God.
And then once I was, so you can avoid the reviews, but then like once when I was killing time and I should have been on an hour, I was clicking through Gwyneth Paltrow. It was like, oh, Gwyneth Paltrow's birthday today. And I clicked on that, and there was a link here. And sooner or later, it was like a review of Bounce. And the headline was, Gwyneth Paltrow, Ben Affleck, Don Roos. Who could have predicted the mess that resulted?
Oh no.
That was just like clicking my way into. Took a couple weeks for that to go.
Bad things from cyberspace.
Yeah, you have to be really careful. I think the main thing the problem is that it's a huge time waster, and it kind of looks like work because there's a lot of clicky click.
But I want to say this goes back to the question that you asked. There's never a point where you don't get rejected. And sometimes you feel like if only I could have Don Roos's career, for example, then I wouldn't have to face this rejection of what if I write something and people don't like it. But in fact, you may get rejected and all your friends know it and people you don't know it, and you can be just innocently, Googling something and get something horrible that somebody has said about you back in your face.
It always sounds like the little voice in your head. I mean, uncannily, it sounds like what you've been hoping people wouldn't notice.
Yeah, and you remember that exactly, but I bet you there's plenty of really positive reviews where you don't remember exactly what they said.
Yeah, I mean, that is the essence of what we do, is that we are going to be rejected. Even if you have a great success, there's always people that don't like that thing that you did that is a great success. Not just don't like it, but write about it, hate it, can't stand it, tell you how much they hated it. People will do that with you as soon as you put something forth. So you can't, it's like a fool's errand to even try to protect yourself or think in terms of how could I not be rejected. That's not the thought. The thought has to do with, the kind of thing that makes me feel better is I think about all the people that I most admire and how rejected they were. I always think about, I think about The Wizard of Oz and what bad reviews it got. It got terrible reviews and people were like, I don't know. you know, and that those brilliant songwriters who wrote Over the Rainbow, who wrote the song Over the Rainbow, Harold Arlen and Yip Harburg, when they first played Over the Rainbow for what's his name, who was, you know, the head of the studio, they were like, no. And they wanted them to not have it be in the film. And they had to fight for that song to be in the film. So I sort of cultivate stories like that, and I think about that, and to me the lesson of all that is it can't be about that. Somehow that can't be your little measuring thing of what it is you're doing. I mean, it just has to be, you have to be taking it from somewhere else, not from the rejection that will surely come.
One of the things that Winnie and I are hoping, you know, that this series of classes is just like that Mythbuster, that if this, then I won't be rejected anymore. That there's an answer that we can give you that makes it easier to face that, but there's no end to that. That's why you've got to find some other way around it. That's why I think Don's kitchen timer thing is just fascinating, because it is a way to say, to go around, to make an end run around the, you know, the rejection, the am I a good person or a bad person?
The fear of being mediocre.
The fear of being mediocre.
And that phrase that you used that I thought was really powerful about parenting yourself and making sure that you had a safe environment, you know, I think that is a very powerful way of thinking about this, because that's really what it's about, is creating the safety where you can, you know, just feel that you can let go and say what's on your mind.
But I had, you know, like a lot of people in this room, I had a super critical parent, and that's the one that's around.
What are they like?
Oh, it's awful.
Really?
It is so hard,
I was
Dawn.
bathed in love.
You were
from
bathed
birth.
in love?
Yeah, just a big love bath.
But, you know, so many of
Not
us.
that great, Mom. I remember.
No, it's that great. But we all have that other parent, and I thought it was so ingenious to think of, you know, if we had the good positive parent and the parent that had said, you know what, sweetie, this is enough. Just to do this today is enough, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be as good as Billy Kreisel and, you know, whoever the people were from your childhood.
That's true. I mean, I read something when I first started writing. Somebody said their motto was, a job worth doing is worth doing badly. And I think that's a great motto for a writer.
Right.
I mean, if it's a story worth telling, it's worth telling really badly. And maybe you're going to tell the worst version of it. But you can always make a mess and clean it up. You can always, you know, sometimes I tell myself, well, write the bad version of the scene. Just write what if you had no talent at all? What would this scene look like? And you write it, and then you fix it. Then it's a rewrite job. And you're rewriting the worst writer in the world. I mean, how easy is that? So you play these little games, but it's always kind of good to take the pressure off, you know, and just do it badly then. Write a bad scene. Write the next scene badly, quickly and badly, and then fix it.
I can do that.
I can do that.
You, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. Denzel's, there were a lot of things in that script that Denzel didn't like. I was trying to do a period piece, and I did do some research, and he had brought a modern African-American sensibility to that piece, and it was very, very hard for him to actually do the things that were in that piece. He found that very, very difficult. So he tried for a while to do it, and he said, you know, I just can't do it. It's just not me. So he left the picture, and then we found Dennis Haysbert, who I thought was great. And I mean, I just love Denzel. No, really. I mean, it was such a catastrophe when he left the picture, which is only because in Hollywood there's like 1, 2, 3 black actors. That's it, that mean anything, that people know anything about. And Dennis Haysbert was not one of them. So that was really difficult.
It's all about calming the fear, you know. I mean, that's like a common thread, you know, that somebody like Denzel Washington calms their fear.
Yeah, their fear about doing an interracial love story. I remember we showed it to Glenn Close's people read it. Or was it Glenn Close? I shouldn't actually use a name because I don't think it was her. And then I'll get in trouble. But one actress read the piece. She said, "You know what? I love it, but I don't think my audience would accept me kissing a black man." And this was 1990.
Wow.
Wow. That's heavy.
It wasn't Glenn Close, but it was somebody like that. It was somebody like I was surprised.
Do we say like somebody major?
Yeah, somebody big, someone I thought had all the right politics. That's what came back to me. Now, what really could have happened is like I hate the script and I hate the writer, but what I heard was that was the story that was told to me. You can never really be sure when you're being told no what the real reason is. They'll make up anything, you know.
It seems like, though, that's the kind of thing you'd make something else up.
Yeah, you would think so.
Rather than
Well, no, it's safe to
bad.
admit you're a
Just make
racist
the
in
person look
Hollywood.
really bad.
It's safe to say that. Yeah, that was really shocking because I thought it was quite a tame. I mean, I remember a TV movie called My Sweet Charlie with Patty Duke and an African-American actor in the 70s. So this was, you know, not that I stole it, but it was similar.
Well, that's what
And I stole it,
just
but it
one
was
second.
similar and I...
That's one of the things I was trying to say before when I was sitting in the other chair, was I was trying to say, like, the fact that you have Maggie Gyllenhaal have an abortion in the movie, as simple as that might, I mean, you know, you just didn't make much of it, and it just unfolded, and it was just this one other choice people were making. But, you know, that's a very... In our country, people aren't allowed to put that in the movies.
No.
I mean, I know I wrote a movie a long time ago in the 80s, and I innocently, you know, had never written a movie before. I mean, it was the first movie I sold, and I had a scene where a girl had an abortion, and she, you know, like a lot of girls, she had an abortion and went right on living, and it wasn't a big deal to her.
She didn't learn a lesson?
She didn't learn a lesson, and she wasn't then
And she
hit
didn't
by a
bleed-
car.
And she didn't bleed to death?
No, she didn't. I forgot to make her bleed to death. She simply just had an abortion, and it was the first thing they targeted. It had to go. Nobody else in the studio could read it until the abortion scene was out. This was, of course, a woman executive. You know, please, 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 just get it out because we can't have the lead character.
Well, Michelle Pfeiffer in
Have
Love
had an
Field had an
abortion.
abortion in her past. And halfway through the film, the script, her character admitted that I had an abortion because I don't think I love my husband. And that was the only note we got on the script was, does she have to have an abortion?
Right, people are very afraid of that, and
Yeah.
I just I'm just saying I'm very admiring of the fact that I can tell it all just comes out of character, and it isn't something you're pasting on there to make a point. But I love that you're just letting your characters do these things that aren't usually allowed in American movies. I mean, it's very refreshing.
Yeah, that's true. But, you know,
it's-
once you're gay, who gives a shit? You know what I'm saying? You are so fucked. It's like,
I hear you.
you know what I mean?
Yes,
They don't care.
Is that something your mommy said to you? Once you're gay, who gives a shit, dog?
This lady.
I love the story that you told about the party that you went to and you told someone an idea and they said, oh, don't write that. And it just made me think of like, that's always a struggle for me is that even if you're able to finish your 1 hour of writing, then maybe you go out to dinner and everyone's sort of like, what are you working on? How's your writing going? You know, just sort of wondering if you can talk a little bit about social life and being a writer and how sort of how to keep those separate and how to make yourself have like a safe environment, you know, not to have something like this.
Well, the question is when you go out, you're writing and then you go out and you have a social life and people ask you about your work and there's a possibility they might say something about what you're doing. That's why I never tell them. I never tell them anything. I just say I'm working on something. It's awkward, though. It's awkward. They go, what are you writing? I go, you know what? I don't really talk about my work in progress. And I can see them all saying, get her. You know, I literally see them. Okay, Mr. Artist. Whatever. And I'm like, oh no, I'm riveted. What do you do? Tell me all about your work. Like, I give a shit. You know, they don't really care. They're just making conversation. They don't know what they're doing. They're just making conversation. They don't understand what the creative process is. But it would be like going up to a pregnant woman and woman says, yeah, I'm pregnant. Really? Can I peer inside? Just let me look and see how it's coming along. Well, what child would ever come to term?
Or you know what? I'm not sure I would do a baby like that.
Yeah, exactly. Really? 2 arms? I think you just really have to, you know, who's more important? Some idiot asking you, first of all, anyone who asks you what tell me the story you're working on, they won't be a friend for long. Really, that's not. I don't think people should ask that question. So you have to educate them. You just have to say, you know what? For me, I never talk until it's finished. You can read it when it's done. They'll shut up about your work real quick. I'll drop you off a copy when it's done.
You can pretend to be superstitious. I've done that. You can say, oh, it's bad luck to talk about it. I also you can tell I like to talk. I mean, I used to tell everybody everything, cab drivers, everybody everything. And I really did have the same exact experience. I started probably with me, it had to happen, for years, but I would always getting people saying weird stuff to me, which was just them making conversation. But for me, it was like a dagger in my heart.
Yeah.
It was like,
sometimes
really?
Is that if you talk about your work, it almost like dissipates the pressure that you almost need to let build up in order to release it, because I know sometimes I'm looking for reassurance, I'm looking for something to talk about, I'm looking for the answer to the question, what are you doing? What are you up to? It's very hard for me not to want to go, well, I'm doing this and that and the other, and then all the juice goes out of it. And, you just have to be willing to have that uncomfortable moment where you're not, satisfying them or making yourself feel better about the answer to the question, what are you up to?
And I would say the same thing about when you've written something and you give it to people to read and you're like, tell me what you think. If they don't really like it, they can't help you. So they have to basically like it in order to help you. It's just if you had a kid and your neighbor hates your kid. It's just like, your kid is not my type of kid. Let me tell you what you should do about your kid. You'd say, you know what, I don't care. But if your sister who loves your child says, there's a little trouble with the killing of pets that I think you might want to address, you would be like, all right, that's a very good point. And where's my cat? But don't take a note from somebody who doesn't love it, really, who doesn't have an honestly positive response, like, I really, really enjoyed it. I was confused. That's fine. But if they give you this, well, it wasn't really my cup of tea, take that and run with it. Because when people try to be smart and try to sound smart and they want to help you, they wish it were a different movie than the one you actually wrote. If they say, it wasn't for me, say, oh, thank you so much for reading it, and stop talking about it. If it's not for them, their opinion is never going to help you. You got to be very careful. I really believe in output. I don't really believe in a lot of input. I show it to my boyfriend, and the best notes are, I didn't understand when she did that. Those are really good notes. Or your character has two different names. You forgot to. Those are great. Or I was really confused about this. Did she have an abortion or the adoption? I wasn't quite clear about it. That's really important information for you. Questions. But I don't really want to take your opinion of my piece, because you're trying to make another movie than I'm making.
Let's take two more questions. Are you up for two more questions?
Oh, yeah. It's about me. I could be here all night.
We already did.
More.
Linda.
Hi.
You talked a little bit about you want the work to come from the unconscious, and I wish I understood what that meant.
Oh, I don't even know what it means. I want the work to come from the unconscious, you said. I said, I think that sometimes when you are working an hour a day or whatever your allotment is, your mind is kind of working on the process while you're not thinking about it. I think some work gets done. But believe me, writing for me is a very conscious, I'm asking questions. What interests me? What would be the best version of that story? What would be the most... but if she does that, won't that make her this? How can I make her less that? Because I want that effect. It seems when I'm writing to be very, very conscious. When I go back over my notes, especially if you're seeing the beginning of my process for happy endings, it's like, where the fuck did that come from? I don't have a stepbrother or a stepsister. It's interesting to see what things start to link up. And you may be a stranger to them a year later. When you go back, you can't recreate that process. Maybe that's subconscious. But the act of writing is really a lot of questions and how can I get my effect? If I want this to happen, what does she have to do for that to get there? And what does she have to do so I understand why she's doing what she's doing? It's a lot of conscious work. But I do think there's a mysterious element about it. I don't believe in God or that, but I do believe that there's some
You
kind
used
of
to
stuff.
before last year, though.
Yeah, I
didn't
did.
you?
I did for a while. But then Alexander Payne came on
Oh.
the scene and can't be a god. So I think that really the experience of writing will feel very conscious.
What are you doing? You're like free associating and just, you know, just
Yeah.
put it in a journal and just all this stuff kind of comes out and whatnot. Is that what you mean? That, you know, like, that kind of like off the wall thought that
Yeah.
somehow just hit
Yes.
something?
Like when I sat down to write The Opposite of Sex, a movie that I wanted to make had just fallen apart, and I was sitting in bed, just feeling sorry for myself, with a reason this time. And the image of me of a young girl throwing a chair into an open grave instead of a rose came to me. And I don't know where that came from, because, nobody had died, but that image came to me. And then the process of, so that, because maybe that bubbled up from somewhere. But the actual process of turning that into a film, well, who is she mad at if she throws that into the grave? Who is that in the grave? What did he do to her? Maybe he had sex with her. Is she pregnant? Maybe she is pregnant. Well, then she's going to get away, but where's she going to go? Where would she go to? Well, maybe she has a brother. But if it's a brother, wouldn't he know about the incest? Well, maybe he's a half-brother, and they've been separated for 20 years. I mean, pretty soon, and what would be interesting about him, So it's, it may begin subconsciously, and you may arrive one day with some things worked out. Oh, I'll just do this. And you don't know where that comes from. But a lot of it is real conscious questioning, cold-blooded kind of examining of the effect you want to create and how to get there.
Take one more question.
A lot of the process seems to work for the kind of writing that you do, which is you write movies and you're writing your own kind of movie. But what about when you worked on a TV series? Was that just a whole different? You created that show, didn't you?
I created one TV show, but please let's not go
Do you
there.
want to repeat
The question is, this works if the method you're talking about may work if you're writing a spec and it's your own special voice and whatever. Does this method work for everything else? And without talking about the TV show, because I barely remember when I worked in TV, I just did an assignment. I just did an adaptation of a very, very difficult book to adapt. It was very, very, very difficult. I was very afraid that I wouldn't be able to get it done. And I did the hour-a-day thing. And, it just works for whatever job you have as a writer. I guarantee you your biggest problem and your biggest job to solve is, how do I get rid of this critic? How do I let go of this fear so that I can actually problem solve? How do I do that? That's going to be your biggest problem. It's not going to be, how do you make a movie? How to make a movie about a dog hotel, where I was rewriting a project where two kids, brother and sister, get exiled to a strange town. They find a stray dog in a haunted house, and it's not really what I wanted to say to the world necessarily, but it was a problem, and my biggest problem was not how to make sense of that, but really how to get rid of my fear. I want to do a good job, and I want to allow myself to use all the tools that I have, but I can't do it if I'm afraid I'm not going to create. So it works for whatever kind of writing. I do it for email, because I'm the kind of person who, people write and they're like, oh God, I go into my email and there's 50 emails there. So I set the timer for 10 minutes and I do the bottom 10, and when the timer goes off, I'm done. It's so manageable. I'm just going to be here from 10:30 to 10:40. That's all. I'll do 10 minutes on the email. Not I'm going to clean out my email. I'm going to write the wittiest emails. I'm just going to be writing emails for 10 minutes. So you can try it if you don't trust it. You can try it with other things. A lot of stuff. You can try it with organizing your office. If your office is a pigsty and it's too much for you to handle, all of that is fear. All of that is fear. I can't do it all. Turn on the timer and say, for the next week, I'm going to do 50 minutes a day in that office, and you will be surprised at what you can get done once you take your own fear, which has been beat into you all your life. The thing about fear is that it's a wonderful motivator, and it works. It works all the time. I got to get this project done. It's life and death, and you do all-nighters, and your parents yell at you, and if you don't get good grades, and fear works a lot, But where it starts to fall apart is when we're trying to sit down in a very scary world and face a blank page. Fear is not going to help you there, because you need to be relaxed to let your ideas out. So the problem with all tools that turn on you is that once they worked, and we've learned that they've worked, and we're attached to them, and we only think we can write if we create some kind of drama, some kind of deadline, some kind of, I'm not going to work this week, I can't work this week, but Friday night, I'm going to lock myself in the room, and I am coming out Monday morning with an outline. You know, that has worked in the past for term papers, and it's worked for dieting, and it's worked for a lot of things. But it has, for me, it had stopped working, and I could not write in the way that I wanted to, using fear as my motor. So I had to find a way around it. But I would try it on anything.
I want to thank you so much for being here.
Me
I
too.
mean,
Thank you so
what
much.
what I love about Don Roos is in every one of his movies.
Really.
And I would also recommend that you guys go back, listen to the commentary track on Happy Endings. It's just fascinating. But I just really, really appreciate you coming in, sharing this. I think there may be copies now. Oh, it's out there if you guys want to take a look. He's so generously shared the work in progress. But Don, thank you so much.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Roman and Winnie for doing the call.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys next week. This is another book. I'll bring it back next week, but I want to put this on your reading list if you're interested. This is another incredible book. Again, not literally about writing screenplays, but it's just a great book about the creative process. It's called 100 Demons by Linda Berry. Have you ever